Hi, I'm Anna,
And I'm Kent.
and this is Film and Family, a podcast about feature filmmaking for professionals in the film industry with families. Hit subscribe to never miss an episode.
Let's jump right in.
Okay, here we are. Today's podcast is the Indecision Diet.
So we don't believe in diets.
We don't.
Except
But this one
kind.
is a good one.
So, you know what's funny? I'll actually go into dieting. Let's start by talking about dieting. We don't really believe in dieting, even in like a coaching program sense. Anna, you are a certified life and weight loss coach,
Technically, that was part of my certification, yes.
But we don't really subscribe. I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I don't really subscribe to weight loss.
Yeah.
Because I think that leads to body shaming. I believe in healthy lifestyles or health. And I don't believe in dieting in the sense that that word can be confusing, even though the word itself doesn't have to be bad. I just think the better word is trying to focus on having a healthy lifestyle. So when I think of like, what am I going to eat? I don't think in terms of diets. I think in terms of lifestyle, which is sort of a forever mentality, right? So today we're talking about the indecision diet. So I think I would apply the same principle to that. We don't believe in stop doing something just as like a pure exercise, like stop sneezing, Anna, in the podcast. You don't know if you can hold it in. But in this case, indecision is something that doesn't really serve us. That doesn't mean that careful decision making is bad, but let's talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, this podcast is not really about a diet, but it is about a lifestyle change that you might make, which...
Give yourself 5 seconds to figure out what you're going to eat for dinner when you open the fridge. That's the indecision diet.
Wait, there's the seafood diet.
I'm going to eat
seafood and I eat it.
Yes.
Okay, so the indecision diet comes from this idea that, first of all, transformation, which a lot of us want to transform some part of our life and change it, we always think about as taking a long time. And it doesn't need to take a long time. It actually can be very fast. One thought can transform everything, or one decision. Often it's a decision. So
it's like Inception. You know, he talks about like the most powerful parasite is an idea. I can't remember his speech at the beginning. It's like this idea that like one idea, when you plant it, it can change everything.
It really can. So what usually takes so long is us deciding to say yes to what we want to do or to make that decision. And really, indecision is one of the biggest time wasters out there. And we can spend a lot of time not moving forward because we're still deciding between options. And we feel like that's productive to sit on a decision for a long time. But I'm a big believer that decision making can be extremely fast and that it's better when it is. Any decision, even if it feels really big or important, can be made in like 15 minutes or less.
You. I'll marry you.
You're
that one. That one.
Yep. You know, you gather information, so that sometimes takes some time. Gather some information. But once you have your information, the decision doesn't have to take long.
Do you have time for a 15-minute date before I decide to marry you?
That's good.
I have a very quick list of questions I'd like to ask you to gather some information before I make this decision.
It didn't take me long to decide I would like to go on a date with that guy.
That's true. Maybe you break it down into smaller decisions.
We'll start there.
In that particular case. Yeah.
So, indecision, big time waster. People who master the skill of decision making see transformation faster than those who don't. Change happens much faster because often that's what's holding us back from getting the change that we want. Is just like, okay, am I really going to do this?
Oh, yeah. Oh, you know, it takes us years sometimes to quit our day job or to make certain decisions and be bold and try stuff that's risky. And it's like, does it make a difference? Does all that waiting always make a difference? Sometimes it makes a little difference, but I've seen people that like, man, they just kind of rev their engines on neutral for a long time.
Well, and often they're waiting to feel ready.
Yeah.
And you just might not ever feel ready.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And you know what? Some people don't like it. Some people just don't like it. I mean, I'm saying this like some people don't even like working with us. Some people don't like working with us because we're that way.
Yeah.
Because we jump in and say, "Listen,
We're okay with being
we've never
uncomfortable.
done this before and it's going to be uncomfortable. Like there's going to be a large learning curve and sometimes learning and growing comes with growing pains and that can hurt." And some people are really down to be part of that. Some people are still learning themselves. Some people are maybe ahead of us, but they're very happy being in like an environment where all that learning and growing is happening. And some people are like, this is unorganized. This is unprofessional. I don't like this. It's not perfect. And you know what? They're prioritizing their own things. And I'm not saying that to bash on anybody, but if you want to become someone who's growing as much as you possibly can, I would highly encourage just like embracing that. Just embracing like
The discomfort.
when you know one day I would really like to do that. And it's not like a one day I would like to learn the piano. I mean, unless that's a really big priority for you, if it's one day I want to make narrative film, I would recommend doing whatever big, heavy jumping you need to do because you're going to have to pivot eventually. It's going to cost money eventually. It's going to, you
Well,
know what I mean?
and
Like,
we're all about balance, but it is sometimes true that waiting can actually make it harder to make that jump. Like the longer you
yeah,
stay in the same situation, the harder it gets to change it and then the more comfortable it becomes.
yeah.
So,
Because if you're like in your 60s and you're making loads of money because you've already built a career on something that's not what you actually want to be doing, pivoting careers is going to plummet your income. But if you're like finishing up school or you're just out of college and you've got this young poor family and you're like trying to build up a commercial career in filmmaking, which is nothing wrong with, we do commercials here, but you really really want to make feature films and you're like, well, once I build up a big commercial career I'll be allowed to make feature films or then it'll be okay or appropriate. I see people do this all of the time and they're like still waiting to do their first feature because they're like waiting for the perfect opportunity or they're waiting for something that's going to pay them as much as they're earning now in commercials. But you don't get paid to do something you've never done before. You don't get paid to do stuff that you might not actually be good at yet because it takes time and learning to get good at stuff, right? It takes experience to get good at stuff. So start building that experience as soon as you possibly can. And you know, we're still pretty young, but I still feel like we got started later than we could have.
yeah.
We could have made our first feature years ago
Hmm.
if we would have just jumped into it. And you know what? We've learned a ton of things that have really helped us on this feature, but I could have learned those things years ago if I would have just failed hard on a first feature somewhere else doing something else, you know, like script would have been worse because I've learned a lot since then. Cinematography would have been worse. I mean, everything would have been worse, but at the same time, like, who cares? We would have gotten it out of the way. Like, it's
Yeah,
like,
it's kind of inevitable. You're gonna hit that somewhere, and
and you know, we probably could have waited till we were in our 40s, and this feature that we just made would have been a lot less stressful, and we would have made a lot less mistakes.
I don't know if that's true. I think it might have been more
But we
stressful
couldn't
and
have
more.
avoided all of them. We
Yeah,
couldn't have avoided all the mistakes.
and it's sometimes harder. Like I think if I was in my 40s and I just made my first feature and it was what it was, I would have felt
Even
maybe
more
even
pressure.
worse. Yeah, maybe
And
even
we
worse.
couldn't have told the story that we just told later in our lives because we're only this age with this kind of family and this kind of a house with these kinds of kids right now
Yeah.
in our lives. And that's the same for you, right? You've got stories to tell, but you're not going to have those stories in 10 years. You're going to have new stories in 10 years. So, anyway, I'm getting a little emphatic about what is probably a tangent.
I feel like we do talk about this topic a lot, but it is something that we've really embraced and learned from, and even though it's uncomfortable, we've become comfortable with the discomfort or
Yeah.
even just willing to live with it because of the growth that comes with it. So,
I mean, do you know how old Brandon Flowers was when he wrote Hot Fuzz with his band? They made a band, they released a record. He was 20 years old. Hot Fuzz was a huge album. Huge. Anyway, just throwing that out there. Mentioned Brandon Flowers on the last episode. But I'm just saying, he could have sat around and been like, I got to go to school first. I've got to, like, I don't know, study poetry or lyricism or listen to more music. I can't hang out with these other guys that are in bands. He didn't. No, he's 20 years old and he just released an album.
yeah.
Obviously, that's not going to happen for everyone, but
Yeah.
he
No,
could have
but the
waited.
sooner you fail, the sooner you succeed. There's a saying that success and failure live in the same neighborhood. So if you're not failing, you're not even in the neighborhood of success.
Yeah.
So it's just part of it, like being willing to put yourself out there. But bringing it back to decision making, this skill of being able to make decisions quickly will help you see change faster, growth faster, but also it's a useful skill making films. If you're a director or whatever creative stewardship you have on a project, you need to be able to make decisions quickly. And this is in a field where it's kind of ambiguous. There's not like a clear right or wrong answer that you just solve the equation and say, this is the answer. You have to make a decision because of your reasons and because of what you feel. And so this is
because of your reasons.
This is a process that will hopefully help you develop that skill that I'd like to outline in the podcast today. And I use this with my clients. And it's not actually a process that they taught me when I got my coaching certification.
This is patented Anna process.
No, it's not exactly, but I'm sure I gleaned pieces of it from all sorts of places. And I know that Jody Moore does a similar process, and she taught me that similar process, if not this exact process. So I can't take credit for it, but I just was shocked how the number one tool I use is the model. And the number two most popular tool that I use is this decision-making model. And it's just something we have to do all the time, make decisions.
And so for those new to the podcast, the model is a paradigm of understanding our brains, which is very simple to understand, but takes a lot of practice to actually actively implement into your life. And so our Film and Family Academy incorporates applying this model, this paradigm, into how to transform our film careers and our family lives primarily, but also any aspect of your life that you're trying to wrap your brain around, so to speak. And that model is that our circumstances are what trigger our thoughts, and our thoughts are what generate emotion, and our emotion drives our actions, and our actions are what create our results. So our circumstances trigger the thoughts that are happening subconsciously, but basically you can start to actively shift those thoughts once you see what they are. And although you can't control your circumstances, you can take over the model at the thought point, and that can transform the whole rest of the model, including emotions, actions, and results. So you can start to direct your life and achieve the results that you want.
It's very powerful because it's
very simple, but very powerful.
It goes beyond a simple action plan, which we have as well, like do this and then do this and here are all the steps. We outline that for you, and we have a free checklist you can download with that basic outline of the structure, but then we go into detail on each of those.
The checklist is for like how to make your first feature film.
Yes. So we go into detail on each of those, and we talk about action steps, but even more than that, it's incorporated with personalized coaching to apply it to your unique circumstances. And so it takes you all the way back to the root, which is your thoughts and your beliefs and your feelings that are actually driving your actions, because most of the time we actually kind of know what to do. We just aren't doing it. And we need to figure out why we aren't doing it and how to get ourselves doing it and enjoying it and finding balance while we do it. So those are kind of the areas that we specialize in, are just, yeah, you could get a book on how to make a feature and you could do it. It's not that hard.
Why haven't you?
Yeah, why haven't you yet? And that's what we figure out and dive into.
Yeah. So before we go into this decision-making process, which is also really awesome, I'm just going to throw out, I've been watching Anna. Anna is the one who does all of the one-on-one coaching. I don't do any of that in this, but I do record podcasts and I do a lot of the production side of things. And she does one-on-one coach me. It's totally transformative. If you think this sounds, I don't know, strange or whatever, it works. And yet again, we see people who are open about their stories and are comfortable sharing stuff. I see these people going through transformative, life-changing experiences when they're going through this. It's like 12 weeks of private coaching and then like a lifelong membership of educational course content and whatnot. It's like night and day. It's mind-blowing to me how people come in like working day jobs they don't like in family situations that aren't the healthiest for them, or like they're just wondering why their relationships
they're going to get a divorce. They're going to, yeah. But the crazy thing is it's only 3 months like of the coaching, but it's in like those months,
session a week. Yeah.
They're quitting their day jobs. They're moving across the country. They're writing their feature film scripts. They're jumping on sets.
They're dating for the first time.
It's
They're
crazy.
losing weight. And it's not even like they're getting coached on all those things. But sometimes many of those things happen in one single client. And it's just, anyway. So now I'm evangelizing. Listen to the last episode if you're wondering why I'm getting all, on this kick. But let's talk about decision-making processes, which is the second, that was like the preface, right? The second most powerful tool that you feel like you've seen work in the lives of your clients.
Yeah, no, I think this is good to bring up just because a lot of the things we talk about on this podcast might seem somewhat peripheral? Not sure which is the correct word there.
We're all learning. I think it's peripheral.
Peripheral to, no, I can't say it, to film and family. But it really does all relate back. And it's nice that people go into this thinking, I'm going to make my feature film. And then they come out feeling like, not only am I going to make my feature film, but my whole life is different.
Yeah.
It's changed. So these are tools that apply to film and anything. So a lot of the stuff we talk about, you can apply to film and your family and your personal life in every aspect. So use this with your kids when you're parenting and you need to make a decision and your kids are throwing a fit or they don't know what to say.
I'm going to make a decision right now.
Seriously, this is a good skill to have. So first of all, it's good to start on paper just when you're learning it. Eventually you can do it in your head, but start on paper and number one, list out the options that you're actually considering. There can be 2, 3, however many you want. And then this is not your typical pros and cons. So pay attention to this step. For each of the options, just list your reasons for each one, like reasons you would choose that one.
And just as like a fun exercise way of doing this, just imagine that someone gave you $1 million. I think that's like a nice way to practice this and see what that looks like in context. I mean, it could be anything, right? It could be, right? There's an infinite number of decisions in our lives we could plug into this, but I just like that one. That's kind of a fun one. If someone gave you $1 million, list all the options that you would personally consider.
Yeah.
I could do this, or maybe I would do that.
If there's some top ones.
I would maybe just invest in real estate, or maybe I just self-fund my own feature film, or maybe I'd live off of it for X number of years based on my own, yearly expenses and whatever. I'd pay off debt, or maybe I'd do a mix of things. Just start listing all the things that you do with $1 million. And then instead of making pros and cons, just list the reasons for, well, the reason I would do this one is these reasons. The reasons I would do this one is these reasons. And you start listing them under each option that you've already created.
And then really simple, but you just pick the one you like your reasons for the most. Now, it sounds very simple, but really it becomes very clear once you list out your reasons. I've pretty much never had a client not be able to make a decision instantly when they see their reasons and say, well, which ones do you like your reasons for the most? Very clear. And watch out for fear-based reasons, which will hold you back. This process kind of helps you not have those because it's reasons for, not reasons against. And the reasons against are often fear-based. You're like, well, if I choose this, then I might not have the stability of my paycheck. I might not, whatever, like all the reasons you're kind of afraid come up with the cons list. But if you just focus on the reasons for, you're imagining the possibilities. And something that can be really helpful is to think, if all of these options could work out beautifully, like the best you can possibly imagine, which one would you pick?
Yeah.
That gets rid of that fear of failure. You're just like, okay, I can see that if it would work, then this is the one I want.
That's really interesting. I can feel fear even just like cropping up, even though I'm not even pretending to like consider any real stuff. When you say that, I'm always like, yeah, but shouldn't you like prepare for like, but what if, I'm not even considering a real thing. And I'm like already like, fear is a real thing and it really doesn't help. I have an example to share, but you should finish the model here.
Well, it's basically those 3 steps. Those are the main things. I have some tips as far as like,
the considerations.
Yeah, once you have picked one, it's important to stay committed to it. Like keep those reasons somewhere where you can review them again. If you are forgetting or you start feeling that fear or doubt creep up, which you will, you can go back to your reasons and remember why you chose that in the first place.
And if you want to see a great example of this, go watch the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt. That is a great example of that point that Anna just made about stay committed, remember why you chose that thing, and don't let the fear make you quit halfway through. You know, you'll if you watch Moneyball, you'll understand why I'm saying that. It's also just a great movie, and Ben Miller is an awesome director.
Well, and it's also this principle that if you stick with it, if you keep working with it and move forward, it will work. And so your fear of failure often is what creates failure because people quit before they're done.
Yeah, you've ensured failure when you do that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or you don't even start. And then you are definitely ensuring your failure. Your chances of succeeding if you don't even start are zero. And so that fear of failure is often what creates the failure. And when we can move forward and keep going, we won't fail. You'll find a way. If you're committed enough to something to stick with it until you find the way, you will find the way. And so I like thinking of it as kind of like a marriage, like you marry yourself to that decision, and then it's not good to go flirting with the other options that you've considered before after that point. Like beforehand, sure,
It sabotages
date
it.
all your options, like figure out which one you want the most.
That's gathering information.
Yeah. But then afterwards, your marriage is only going to work if you are committed to the one. You can't go switching around from one to the other and have it work. So you do have to stay committed, and indecision can occur after you've made a decision and waste your time even afterwards if you're kind of indulging in that doubt instead of remembering your reasons, sticking with it, seeing it through all the way to the end.
Yeah. I think it's really awesome, and I think it's a powerful thing. It is hard. It's a hard thing to do because I think we're full of fears, but I'll share a personal example. Hopefully it doesn't sound too strange or take very long. I did not know who to marry when I was of marrying age. And Anna and I dated. We were very like, yeah, this could work. And then we didn't see each other for 2 years and 7 months. And that's a long time. And I was gone first for a few months. And then I basically said, hey, we both knew that we were going to go do these mission trips. I told Anna to date while I was gone because we knew it was limited contact. It was a long time. Don't put your life on hold for me. But we were really kind of committed to each other, but we weren't obviously engaged or married. And so it was like, if this is meant to be, it'll work out. But that was the decision we made at the time. And so she dated other people, and it was, she experienced some of that indecision and wasn't sure what to do. And then she left on her mission trip. And then after she was gone for a while, I came home and went back to college and the dating scene and all that stuff. And I had 7 months before she got home. And I actually ended up dating someone a little bit seriously, not extremely seriously. And it was pretty brief, but it was serious enough that it was like, what am I going to do when Anna gets home? Like, what are we going to do? And do I hold out? Do I move forward with this other thing? And I remember for our own deep religious personal reasons, I mean, I prayed about this. I never felt like God would just tell me what to do, which is funny because we really believe in agency in our faith, that it's very central to our lives. And I've found that God doesn't really, in my life, personally, my own spiritual life, I rarely get the experience where it's like, I feel like God is telling me what to do because I don't think he really likes to do that. I think that he leaves these decisions up to us because he wants us to know that we've made those decisions, and he wants us to learn how to exercise that agency. So that said, looking back, I didn't have this paradigm. That's not to preface like I would have made a totally different choice if I would if I could look back and use this paradigm. I could have no. But I think that, like, for example, what's tricky about dating and marriage is like, most of us, I don't think, ever end up where we're like, we have two options at the same time of people we could marry, like,
I mean, both of us kind of did.
Both of us kind of did, but it was like, I think the one thing that you're always experienced there is, well, if I marry this person, I'm going to break this other person's heart. Or if I dump this person, I'm going to break their heart. That's a fear-based thing. And yet it's such a viable thing to consider when you're like, yeah, I mean, like, I could really hurt this person, or I could really break their heart or whatever. But on the flip side, does that make it a good reason to marry someone? Fear of breaking? No, like, that's a terrible reason to marry someone because you don't want to hurt them by breaking up with them. So you're going to enter a marriage that you actually maybe deeply don't feel is like the best idea. And I actually think I am of the maybe unpopular opinion, maybe not, that marriage could work with lots of people. Not anyone, but there are lots of people that are good people that share your values. You guys could, two people could make a life together and work through their differences and have a successful marriage. I don't believe in the one. And I think that the one thing makes it easy after you're married to think, oh, maybe I picked the wrong one, and that's sketch. So I still believe that it could have worked with another person. But once I felt good about my decision, I made that decision. And I can own that decision. I can't blame it on God. I can't blame it on somebody else. And now I move forward. I don't think maybe I picked the wrong one. No, there is no right or wrong one. The right one is the one I picked, right? That's kind of what Anna's saying when she says, it only works if you stay committed. If I'm thinking maybe I picked the wrong one, that's indecision creeping up after I already committed to that person. And this applies to everything. I'm going to make this movie. I'm going to develop this script. I'm going to make a career out of acting. I'm going to quit my day job. I'm going to do this thing. If you start to say, oh my gosh, maybe I made the wrong choice. Maybe there isn't a wrong or right choice. Like maybe you just decide this is the right choice. This is the decision I made, and you don't flirt with the other options. I know guys who quit their day jobs. They go into self-employment and they say, I'll find myself applying for jobs for a week. And then they realize they aren't going to get clients if they're freaking out and thinking the self-employment thing won't work out, and they start applying for full-time jobs other places. And so you see how that indecision is actually hurting their ability to make the initial decision successful. So anyway, a little bit of personal example as well as some further other examples, but I just think that that's such a true principle that you're teaching, Anna, and I found it valuable in my life, and I think it's valuable in a cross-disciplinary way.
Yeah. So I actually just pulled up an email. What you were saying reminded me of this email from my business coach, Stacy Bayman. And I'm actually just going to read part of it. I think it's a really valuable thought that I've been thinking about since I read this. She said, did you know that everything works? Everything. Every diet, every program, every course, every exercise regime, every meal plan, it all works. So why don't people get results? Because they don't. They don't work. They don't keep working. They quit. The worst thing we could ever tell ourselves is that it didn't work. What if you could never say that? What if you could only say, I didn't work? And then later, let's see. She said, you might think, yeah, but some things actually don't work. How do you know when it actually doesn't work and you need to move on? What if it always did? And I could feel myself resisting this at first when I read it. But the more I think about it, the more I believe it. That everything works if you work, if you work to make it work. And so that kind of follows up on what you're saying, Kent, about like, it doesn't actually matter which one you pick as long as you're committed to it and you stick with it. It can work if you are willing to do the work. And in some cases, you might not be willing to do the work to make it work, but you always can. That's always an option.
And it doesn't mean decisions don't matter.
They do.
Decisions matter, and it's not like you should just be flippant about them. We're not recommending flippancy or just like pulling triggers really fast. Like you list options, you list the reasons for each option, and then it's a decision-making paradigm that is faster, but it's also in many ways more correctly informed, because fear doesn't inform good decision-making. Yeah. Reasons that you feel are right, that informs better decision-making, because reasons are the why.
Reasons help you access your higher brain as opposed to the emotional lower brain, which is going to feel fear.
It's usually where the fear comes from, yeah.
Is going to feel doubt, is going to feel all sorts of emotions that cloud that decision-making. This kind of helps you see clearly and make good decisions. But then it's important to remember to stick with those decisions. So yeah, it's like they say with marriage, again, eyes wide open before marriage and then kind of committed to that afterwards. What is the phrase?
Date with both eyes open and be married with one eye closed. Which just is like this idea of like, don't look for the imperfections or the reasons why that person's wrong. Don't look for all those things when you're married. Once you're married,
make it work.
Jack Nicholson said this. Jack Nicholson said, once you cast someone in a role, they become the perfect person for the role. Such a wise thing to say. It's the same thing, right? You vet sometimes hundreds of people for one role, especially a lead role. And then once you commit, You commit to that actor. They are the perfect person for the role. And if you don't believe that, you can't get the best performance out of that actor. And that actor will have a harder time performing their best with you. And then your story's going to suffer. The whole movie's going to suffer. I mean, that's like just crucial. So yeah, what a wise thing from our good friend, Brother Nicholson.
I just want to say you can use this process, start on paper with whatever decisions you have to make, big or small, and try it out. I think you'll see how clear it is once you look at your reasons, which one is the best decision for you. And then commit to it and remember to keep looking back at your reasons. Remember your why. If you're doing this in the moment, like there's people waiting for your answer, you're parenting your kids and they're, they don't have patience, or someone asks you a question on set and you need to come up with an answer. You can't say this out loud. You can just say, okay, well, here are the options I'm considering. And here's why I'm thinking about this option. And here's why I'm thinking about this option.
Sorry, you just reminded me of Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof, where it's like everyone gets 300 feet away from him and like his voice gets echoey and he's like, on the other hand.
I love that movie. Okay. Anyway, so you can just say it out loud. It actually lets people know what's going on in your head instead of just, let me think, hold on, let me write this down. Like you can say it out loud, but the important thing is once you have decided, be confident in your decision. So Emerald, the reason I brought her up, Emerald Fennell, I don't know if I'm saying
it's Fennell.
Fennell. I don't know if I'm saying her last name right, but she directed Promising Young Woman, which was in the Oscar running. Did it win something?
It won screenplay.
Screenplay?
Yeah.
So, that was her first feature film. Anyway, she talks about good advice that she received while she was making her first feature. And she said someone told her, don't allow anyone to ask you, are you sure, on set? And she said, especially because you're a woman director, people are going to ask this all the time.
Or first time. Like even if you're
all of those things combined, for some reason, there's going to be people who are going to doubt. So they said, just don't allow, are you sure, on set. And she said that was like the best advice ever because it's such a time waster. And really that question is not useful. It's just someone expressing their doubt in what you've decided. And then you're just going to waste all this time saying, yeah, I'm sure. And here's why. And the
question, are you sure, is just another way of saying, I'm not sure about that decision.
Yeah.
But if you're a director, your job is to make the decisions. And if you're not the director, your job is kind of like, once the director has made a final decision, is to make that decision with the director. What I mean by that is you decide to back that thing 100%. That is how you make movies. And I know some people might push back on that and say, no, it needs to be more collaborative than that. But
it can be, folks, but that's up to the director. That's their decision.
Right.
So
how collaborative that environment is, and every director is different. But man, when a director finally says, they're the keeper of the story, and they say, this is how we're going to move forward and tell this story.
I think
if quote unquote everything works, like Stacey Bayman said, these subjective creative decisions only work if you get 100% behind the director and let that subjective vision for the story come to fruition. So you support that director. That's what you signed on for. So I have strong feelings about this, obviously, but I
think this is the biggest place where people get roles confused, is just that it's the director's role to make the decisions and it's everyone else's role to support those decisions.
Especially the craft decisions. I mean, like, producer can make budgetary or deal making decisions or whatever, but when you're on set and you're trying to figure out, where does camera go? How are we going to do this shot? How are we going to do this scene? Yeah, that's directorial decision making.
And unless they ask you what you think, it's everyone else's job to just support and bring to life what the director's asked for. They've hired you. That's your job, is to help them make their thing.
And that doesn't mean it can't be collaborative.
No.
There are some extremely collaborative directors, but once that decision has been made, I think it's important that you get behind that vision.
And it's again that thing that, like, it'll only work if we all stick to one decision, like one vision.
Yeah.
And that is the director's job, is to keep that vision, keep it all uniform. And so
that seems obvious to me. I just feel like there might be resistance to that in the audience. And I feel this need to convince you that that's just the way it is. And if an actor is trying to do it one way and the director is directed to be done a different way and the DP is trying to accomplish it some other way, that's going to be a wreck of a film. Like,
it's not going to work.
So you've got to...
You have to have one person to tie it all together.
Mac Wilberg, who is the director of the Tabernacle Choir.
Isn't it Mark?
Mark Wahlberg is an actor whose name is very close to Mac Wilberg. One of my favorite quotes by him is, "Harmony requires submission." You're not a solo singer, you know? And so there's a director, just like there is in a choir or an orchestra, and you follow their lead. And when you do that, this incredible synthesization and harmonization of sound and, in our case, picture happen. And yeah, so that's part of getting behind that decision. You know, it's like you married yourself to that director and you commit, you know, you commit to this story.
It's only going to work if you follow the director.
Voice your opinions. But, you know, this "are you sure" question, she says she started to get people who'd be like, "Are you?"
She could kind of tell. Yeah, it was like a bad habit.
Like after they
she'd
made
say
that
something
rule,
and they go, okay. So I love that. Our next set.
Seems like the movie worked
that's
out.
a rule.
I feel like we're gonna get pushed back on that rule, but anyway.
All right, so that's our episode today. Our invitation is that you go on a diet from indecision. Whenever there's a decision to be made, that you make it in 15 minutes or less or whatever, you know, just right away. Don't put off the decision. Don't think that you have to sit on it and think about it for days or weeks or years.
And, you know, I don't know if we need to add, like, I mean, maybe you don't mean this literally, but the 15-minute thing, you can decide how much time you're going to take to make the decision. And you can maybe say, I'm going to decide by, you know, put it on your calendar, create a stopwatch or whatever you want to do. But decide when you're going to decide and then do these steps. And you might find that you're ready to decide before you said. Or if
you
not,
might just say, this is the day I'm going to decide, and I'm going to set aside some time to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And the point is that you don't let the decision take longer than it needs to, and you stay committed to it after you're done. And that's a powerful thing. Like, even if it takes a week to make a decision, you know, some decisions I think do take longer than others, but they don't need to take forever. And millennials are known for being really bad at making decisions and making them take decades longer than they need to.
Hey, I'm totally there. I've totally been there. This is actually all from personal experience. I went on a diet from indecision where I said, I am not going to, you know, when you ask me where I want to eat for dinner, I'm not going to sit there and say, I don't know, there's this or this, but what do you want? And I don't know.
Restaurants and movies. For some reason, she knew she was going to marry me in like 2 weeks of dating. And she knew like what she wanted to do with her life. And she made some big decisions and just held to those hard. But she cannot decide what to eat for dinner or what to watch.
There's so many good options. It's very hard.
I'm like the other way. I'm like, man, I have no idea who to marry. But I mean, I know exactly what movie I want to watch tonight. Like, so yeah, I don't know which one's better or worse.
Anyway, so for a while that was our joke, that I was on a diet from indecision and I'd just pick something. And once you pick something, you know, it worked because I'd say, all right, let's go to this place. And then I'd start thinking about the food at that place and I'd get excited and I enjoyed it. It was great. So that's our invitation. Try it out. Let us know what you think. If you have any questions,
just do it.
We've decided for you. You're on a diet from indecision.
I was quoting Shia LaBeouf, if anyone appreciates that. Well, if you like what you're hearing on the podcast, you'll love our weekly email.
You can click the link, or I think it says subscribe in the show notes to stay up to date on the latest opportunities and resources we have available. That's included in the weekly email.
Awesome. Let's jump right out.
Okay. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.